Committee will come to order. I think we have most of our members present. This is our first full committee hearing on Social Security since 2008. Our goal here is to get ahead of the curve. As we all know, the Disability Insurance Trust Fund, it runs out of money next year. And that means if we do nothing, under current law, everybody on the program will see a 20% benefit cut. Now, Subcommittee Chair Sam Johnson, along with the ranking member, Mr. Becerra, they've been working on solutions all year long. And a few months back, Mr. Johnson laid out 4 principles for reforming DI, all of which I fully endorse. First, no 20% cut. Stop that from happening. Not going to happen. Second, make sure that all the benefits are paid on time. Third, make the program work better. Fourth, help people who can and want to work get back to work. This is the last point. The last point here I want to dwell on, because Chairman Johnson and his team have been looking at how to strengthen the DI program. And what they've found is the rules actually make it harder for people to work more. Here's the crux of it. If you just make $1 more than you are allowed, you get kicked off the program. In other words, it is a lot safer to stay on the sidelines. It's no surprise then that only 0.5% earn enough to get off the program. The program is way too complex. If you want to work, and 40% of the recipients reportedly do, there are all sorts of rules and regulations that you have to follow. To give you an idea, here's a chart on work incentives from the Social Security Administration. If looking at this chart makes your head hurt, then you're not the only one. We need to reboot our thinking here. Later this month, we will celebrate the 25th anniversary of passing the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I agree that a disability should in no way diminish a person's right to fully participate in all aspects of our society. And that should be the spirit of DI. It will be there for you if you can't work. But if you want to work, we don't want to get in the way. We should recognize that everybody has something to offer. Everybody can contribute, and we should encourage that. So I want to make clear to members on both sides of this dais that we are not here to cut DI. We are here to strengthen disability insurance. That's our mission. I also want to thank our witnesses for joining us here today. Every one of you here brings a unique perspective on disability insurance, and we're very interested in hearing your perspective. So I want to thank you again for taking the time to share your expertise. Your full written statement will be included as a part of the record. And Mr. Zelley, why don't we start with you?
Good morning, Chairman Ryan and Ranking Member Levin from Michigan, as I am, and members of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm honored to speak to you today regarding barriers to work actually caused by our Social Security Disability Insurance System, which I'll call DI. I'm the president of the Disability Network, a company that provides services and supports to thousands of people in Flint and Genesee County. I'm also a paraplegic, use a wheelchair, who's benefited from and been frustrated with disability insurance policies. My experience with DI began 36 years ago following an auto accident that took me out of the workforce for several months as I went through surgery and rehab at Craig Hospital in Denver. I was the senior vice president of a bank holding company at the time, and while at Craig, I was encouraged to apply for DI benefits because I had a significant disability that could affect my ability to work, and after all, like you, I had paid for disability insurance coverage. So even though I wanted to return to work, my company wanted me back, nothing was certain. So I was awarded DI and received a benefit of about $800 a month, which is not a meaningful wage. With a family, I had 7 children at the time. So after months of rehab, I gradually returned to full-time work, and when I informed Social Security that I was going back to work, they told me that I was beginning a trial work period, and if successful, my DI benefits would stop. It didn't make much sense to me. The remarkable paradox was that Social Security strongly encouraged me to return to work right after I told them that I was injured seriously enough to affect my ability to return to work. It just didn't make sense. So eventually, the DI check stopped coming, including an overpayment, which I paid back, and that's a whole other story. My career continued until I founded the Disability Network, an organization where we believe the best way to lift people out of poverty and not be poor is gainful employment. People with disabilities need supports from organizations and companies like us, and DI policies that encourage employment and have an expectation of work. Why would we require people to pay for federal disability insurance to help them in the event of a disabling condition that affects their ability to work, and then penalize them if they do work and make a meaningful wage? When people with disabilities access the very benefit we require them to pay, we immediately take it away when they earn more than a so-called substantial gainful activity, SGA, about $1,000 a month, which is not substantial. Most people would call this a cliff, a poverty wage activity, rather than a substantial gainful activity, because it does not allow for a meaningful income. This is especially true when the cash benefit is commonly used for products or services related to our disability, like aids to daily living or transportation or personal assistant care. So I strongly encourage you to consider a proposal to ramp off the current wage cliff associated with SGA that prevents people from the American dream of independence and freedom. Our policies discourage work, force people into spectator stands, watching the world go by, and we know life is not a spectator sport. We need people in the game, in the economy, working, all of our people. And unfortunately, because of these DI policies, they're not even on our talent bench. A recent study, ACS from Cornell, showed that there are 500,000 working age people with disabilities in Michigan who are not working, and yet 43% of them have a college education or degree. What is wrong with this picture? Leaders from across the nation, you'll hear today, like Randy Lewis from Walgreens, Rick Keyes from Meyer in Michigan, Jeannie Stone from Trigicon, are publicly stating that they want to hire not only people with disabilities, 20%. They have a quota of doing that. They see the talent, dependability, motivation, and improved workforce that occurs when people with disabilities are back in the workforce. It's hard to imagine a cost-neutral, simple way to change DI policies, and yet, at the same time, it's common sense that working people with DI will pay back a portion on that 2-to-1 sliding scale, pay back the actual benefit they're receiving. So you have the opportunity to make a difference to replace a fear-driven, poverty-entrapping system with a simple ramp-off change. Don't let our intended safety net system continue to actually trap people in a poverty net like a spider web, rather than help them bounce back to work like a trampoline. So thank you for this opportunity to appear before you today, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very well said. I appreciate your comments. So, Mr. Zelley? Yeah. Let me ask you, you went into this in your testimony, but go a little deeper if you could about the cliff. How, in your view, from just seeing it in people's lives, does the cliff affect a person's ability and willingness to work? What fear is associated with this? Do people plan and organize their lives around this cliff? Give me a sense of what this is like, what people are experiencing right now.
Well, I agree that the testimony you heard about, people want certainty in their lives, and the system we have is so complex, it gets in the way. The fear comes in two ways. Fear comes from people with disabilities having gone through a traumatic experience, and also fear on businesses' side in terms of, I'm going to say the wrong thing or my health care costs are going to go up. I'll never be able to fire them because of this ADA thing, all of which are not true. You'll hear businesses testify just the opposite of that. The fear comes as I'm certain that I'm going to get $1,000 a month, and if I get one dollar more, I will lose everything. I faced that, but the reason it wasn't a problem for me at the time is that I had a company who wanted to hire me back. I was fortunate that I wasn't a plumber or electrician. I had a skill that was valued, and I could return to that job, and the company wanted me back. So I was able to return, hit the floor running, and then the $800 a month went away. It would have been nice because that helped with my disability-related expenses.
But it's hard after Mr. Zelley testified that he had gone from gainful employment to a benefit of $9,600 a year. I don't think there was an incentive for him to say, I'd like the $9,600 as opposed to what had been a pretty good career. And I think in part of the atmosphere that we've been discussing this in, there's been the suggestion in some quarters that there have been more disability income applications because of the fact that it's been harder to find work. Do any of you want to comment on that?
I would comment that I don't believe that's true. I believe that we are following the population increase of baby boomers. You just heard testimony that says the actual awards are less. So even if you're applying for it, so what? The actuality is that no. I mean, people of acquired disability are looking for ways to get back to work. And Social Security is one way to ramp. It can be one way to ramp back on. It's just too complicated. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's perfect, as a matter of fact. Yeah. If one gets back to the workforce and they give up their benefits, if the problem reoccurs, can they reclaim or can they go back to disability, Social Security disability?
I can state that that actually happened to me.
Okay.
That I can testify that I was able to bounce, went from a job, off the job, SSDI came back right away with the health care insurance. Again, granted, it wasn't a lot of money in my case, but it did come back. So yes, that occurs, and that trial work period starts right again. You're bounced, you're back into it, and it's the same thing. I do want to comment that you have done this, you know, this 20% cut. Don't do that. You figured this out. I know it must be so complex, but you've done it on SSI. You've done it on early retirement. You guys can figure, men and women can figure this out. And because people are depending upon you to figure it out, just get out of the way and let us go back to work. I mean, that's really what we're trying to get across to you today, is that there are barriers in the system that prevent us who want to go to work going to work. And I see thousands of people with disabilities. That's who I'm speaking about. I'm not a math major. You've got very talented math folks, but it must be very frustrating when you got CBO that says you can't count tax income, you can't count new taxes, or you can't count the fact that you're going to be paying SSDI when you're receiving it. Makes no sense. So you have tough jobs. I admire you for what you're doing, but please figure this out.
I think the metaphor you used was the correct one in your testimony, Mr. Zelley, when you suggested the trampoline effect. Thank you.
Are we in this to create an incentive program that creates winners and losers, where the less able to work are punished to try to help those who can work?
For goodness sakes, do not penalize people. And of course not. That's not the intent. We should be incentivizing. I would add, I know it's not going to be a popular statement, but the ticket to work, and I know that's affecting 90,000 people or so, in many ways the ticket to nowhere, because we're incentivizing VR agencies rather than incentivizing the individual. Yeah. If I go back to work, let me keep the money. Why are you giving it to somebody else to help me get back to work? Businesses want the connection. Businesses want me to work. I have skills and talent to work. Only 85% or 15% of people are born with a disability who have it. The rest of us have education and work skills and experience. Just incentivize us to go to work. And so I know this is complex with this offset. It is not intended, I don't think you're hearing it's intended to hurt people. It's all about this, doing it cost neutral. if you will let me work, believe me, you're going to be getting more revenue and more income from me. So, Congressman, I'm hopeful that it isn't interpreted that way.
You're telling me that some of this money gets sidelined and doesn't go to the worker?
I'm sorry, sir?
What you just said is, let us go to work, but let us keep the money. But you mentioned that the money was going elsewhere.
What I was talking about is the ticket to work.
Yes.
Actually incentivizes a rehab company that helps me go to work because Social Security rewards them. They take my Social Security benefit and gives it to them to put me to work. And when I'm saying, stop that. Let me keep it. I'm the one that's going to work, and so reward me or incentivize me for going to work. So again, I know that's controversial because there are people using the ticket. There are people that's helping some people. I just think we're pointing it the wrong way.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
Are we interested in creating losers in this? Are we interested in punishing people as we try to create an incentive to let those who can, as Mr. Zelley was able to, earn more money? And so are we looking to punish those who don't have the ability to earn more money?
I am not in favor of whacking somebody's benefits, just to state that. But I think there's a perception issue that I'd like to address, if I may, Congressman. And that is that when you see that international symbol, and we see it when we park. You've got it here at Congress. We have it at businesses. We have it in our life. We see that international symbol. I wear one that shows somebody carrying a briefcase, meaning that people with disabilities can work. When we see that there's this stereotyping. We talk about mental illness specifically. When you see that, you think, well, what is that? That's someone who needs help, needs a parking spot, medical problem, needs public assistance, lacks education, not working, is a drain on our society. There, but for the grace of God, go I. Or do we see past that wheelchair, past the eyeglasses, you're not bound, and see a person who is dependable, as businesses have found out, dependable, motivated, and loyal, and healthy. They're not sick. I don't need to be healed. I'm working. I have education, talent. See that, and see that they're with the grace of God, go I. So my point is we have this tendency to think that everybody's really poor. Well, they're poor in a system that doesn't work well. That's the reason they're poor. The expectation should be higher, starting early, starting very early with parents. And even at the low teenage years, that yes, there's an expectation of work, and that yes, you'll be part of our society and community, and we have a support system that will bring you on that journey.
A follow-up from the Social Security Administration saying, hey, have you been looking for work, or there's something we can help you with? That seems like a very simple change that I'm not sure if we're doing. Mr. Zelley, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, if you're talking about encouraging people to work, absolutely. And, there's this word bureaucracy, and we all get afraid of it, but it's in our lives. And so let's take advantage of it. Let's absolutely encourage people as you're applying for disability that there are alternatives. And the 2-to-1 ratio, I think I'm all in on this. You're hearing the panel that this is a good thing because you're not penalized for going to work. That's what we want. The other thing I'll just say that, if I may, Congressman, that when I was first injured and I'm laying in intensive care with bolts in my head on a striker frame thinking, we would depend on our faith and family and friends to get us through, and my life was over. What can I do? I have these children I can't provide for. And my brother-in-law, Gene Hamilton, brought in a fella in a wheelchair, a friend of his, the same level as injuries I had, and he started talking about life in a wheelchair, and come to find out, he was a stockbroker making a lot of money. And I thought to myself, it was an epiphany. Well, if he can do it, if he can have a career, if he can make money, I can do it. And so that just changed everything, that peer support. There's organizations called Center for Independent Living. They're made up of, governed by, led by people with disabilities who are working, and I encourage you to support that, engage, and Social Security engage with them early on as people apply. Because when you see somebody else and you get that peer support, it's a bridge to work. It's, yes, I can.
Mr. Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Zelley, you just summed it up. That was the best testimony of the day, your story right there. That's what we're trying to do on this side of the aisle, is to promote that work ethic, that opportunity that you sought and you achieved and you recognized in your peers. So I applaud you in your story. I truly and honestly do. Right here is proactive, get into it early, educate individuals, and then stand with those individuals as they go back to work.
Correct.
Thank you. With that, I yield back.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I thought this was a very insightful hearing, and I hope that we can move in a bipartisan way. I heard some partisan comments. Hopefully that's not what's to come, because I think you can see that we have a deep interest in avoiding this problem, this 20% cut, and making work pay and making this law work like we all want it to work. So I want to thank each of you for bringing your fantastic testimony. It's very enlightening. This hearing stands adjourned.